Okay, we're going to kick off. So thank you everyone for dialing in to join us for our first Data Plus Women London Meetup for 2020. And it is one of our first, I think, virtual sessions we've ever done. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your lunch to be here. Just some housekeeping and FYIs, this session will be recorded, so we will share the link afterwards. Any questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, not the chat, as we won't be monitoring that. Audio is through your computer, so if you have any trouble hearing, please turn up volume on your computer. Polls will be done throughout, so please do participate, really appreciate it. And slides will be shared after the session as well as a link to the recording. So with that, I'm going to quickly show the agenda. So we're kicking off with Eva for Viz 5. Really interesting subject there. It's an interesting project. After that, we've got introducing our new leaders, which is all of us. I think you can see us all on the screen. And then we've got Clara. She's sharing her lessons learned from going from marketing into data analysis. And then we've got Archana doing Imposter Syndrome. And then we're going to close at 1:35. We're going to try and keep questions till the very end of the session because we are short for time, but we will be downloading all of these if we don't get to answer them throughout. So with that, Eva, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you. I'll get you to stop sharing and then I'll start my sharing. Hello, everyone. It's great to have people dialed in for this, obviously at lunchtime and all that. And I want to take a couple of minutes to introduce the Viz 5 initiative. It's the proper name is Visualize Gender Equality. We're going by hashtag Viz 5 in relation to the SDG number 5, which is all about equality for women and girls. And this initiative, as you can see on the screen, is a collaboration of Operation Fistula together with Makeover Monday and the Tableau Foundation. So Operation Fistula are a Tableau Foundation partner. They are very active in the community and they have a data-driven mission to end fistula for every woman everywhere. And they have come up with this idea to visualize gender equality. And we're using Makeover Monday as a platform because it's already a massive project with so many participants who have amazing skills, who use Tableau and a couple of random other tools. And what we're doing is that every month we're going to select 1 week for Makeover Monday where we're going to actually focus on a gender equality topic. Operation Fistula will pick those topics and provide the data and a lot of background information to help everyone work with it. And we want to bring awareness to the issues that really need highlighting. And this week we've started with our first data set. We kicked off on Sunday, International Women's Day. And this week's topic is violence against women and girls, and I encourage everyone to participate. It's the usual Makeover Monday process, so none of that process changes, it's just that the topics are very focused around gender equality. And we hope that over the next 12 months, we can get a huge community together highlighting gender inequality and helping us to tell better stories with data so that we can help organizations and charities and other agencies to work on those topics and to show the urgency with which we need to act. So here is my ask that all of you get involved, build your vizzes, take the skills you already have and your talents and apply them to this topic and help us out with a new perspective on the data. This afternoon, we're running Viz Review at 3 p.m. Seth from Operation Fistula will join me to give feedback on the vizzes from this week. And then stay tuned for another topic next month. And yeah, we're excited. We hope lots of people join us. That's it from me.
Thanks. Thanks, Eva. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen very quickly. Thanks for that, Eva. So I will share a link about this after our meetup here. So if you have any questions, follow that link through. I'm sure, Eva, you're available on Twitter as well. That seems to be the easiest, or LinkedIn, I guess, whatever your preferred method is. But yeah, if you have anything else, I definitely, Eva has all the answers. I think you've been leading this since last year, 2019. So
Yeah. Just reach out. And also, if you look on makeuponmonday.co.uk and then you go to the Viz 5 tab in the menu, you can find more information.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So kicking off onto the next topic. So introducing our Data Plus Women New Leadership. I know it's been a long time. We're really, really excited about it. And I'm going to kick it off by introducing Evie.
Me. Hey guys, I'm Ivy. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Manila, Philippines, and I moved to London 2015 for uni at Queen Mary. Currently, I'm a second-year grad at KPMG for the IGH modeling team, so infrastructure, government, and healthcare. So that's a lot to do with Excel, and at the moment I'm doing a massive SQL project, which I'm really enjoying. So I want to help lead Data Plus Women London because I'm passionate about uplifting and including underrepresented voices in data because I really, really believe that's important. And at work, I'm in the process of restarting a beliefs, bias, and inclusion training. Few fun facts, I have a hissy pet chameleon that hates me at the moment, and I love to do hot yoga. So there you go.
And now it's me. I think you guys have kind of seen me before. I've been with Data Plus Women since last year. Hi, Caroline, again, to anyone who doesn't know me. I'm from Tableau, so it's not really surprising to see me around. I'm born in Australia, if you can't tell, because I do say data, not data. My background is in marketing, and the only places I really save on Google Maps, which is, funnily enough, probably, I don't know if that's stereotypical of me, but is only restaurants. And I cannot resist patting a doggo or a cat whenever I see them on the street.
And hi everyone, I'm Tuba. I was born and raised in Istanbul, Turkey, and I moved to the UK in 2018 to do my master's, which was in business analytics, and I found myself in Tableau basically, which was a good alignment of my studies. I'm trying to help people see and understand their data for about a year and a half now. I am definitely a cat person, and I love swimming, and I'm trying to get back to it right now. And I have the honor to introduce Ellie to you too as well, because she couldn't be here with us today. So Ellie is a data analyst consultant in the Information Lab, which is our partner. She helps various organizations better prepare and visually understand their data. She has background in geography and meteorology. It's very interesting, in my opinion. She was born in France, grew up in England, is half Polish, and has a dual citizenship. She's British and Australian, which is diverse enough for us, I guess. She loves running and art. She's actively painting and visiting galleries. She has a too long list for travel, but she's always looking for more recommendations from everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm Archana. I'm an associate sales consultant at Tableau, and what that means is I work on the same team as Tuba, so we help our customers basically see and understand their data. And most recently, I started working with the media and gaming sectors. On the side, I occasionally get the chance to get Dram for work, which is the picture you see there, hosting our IMViz competition, so that's data visualization competition. I think I'm the only one in the group who's London born and raised, and for me it's always south over north, all day, every day. And I could often be found scheming with Caroline, who we like to call Yam Yam, and the rest of my girl gang, Shaz and Gabby. And I'm also a rabid reality TV fan and will watch absolutely anything, the trashiest TV out there. So please give me your recommendations in the Q&A box below.
Right, and hi, I'm Clara. So I'm French, as you can probably hear, but I moved to London 5 years ago, and I absolutely love this city. I really like acting as a translator between technical and creative teams, and I really love making data accessible to all, so I particularly love data visualization. I'm passionate about bringing up women in technology. It's the topic of my talk a little bit later. I can start in data technology, and I think it's a fascinating field, but that can be a bit overwhelming sometimes. I work for Penguin Books, so I'm always here for a good book recommendation. If you have any questions, please send them over. I love talking about books all day. And I really like going out of my comfort zone. I have been doing dog sledding, mountaineering, climbing, anything a bit outdoorsy gets me excited.
And I guess we're going straight into...
Hello again.
She said on a wig.
Right, so that's quite a good transition with the beginning of my presentation. So the reason why I wanted to talk to you guys today is because I studied marketing and communication and design a little bit as well. I did a master's degree for data professionals. The first one has to do with the double diamond methodology. So the double diamond methodology is something I've heard about for the first time starting to work with. It's better now. Hopefully, yes. So the first lesson, the double diamond methodology. It's something I've started to learn about by working with some designers, and it's one of the big principles of design thinking, which is designing the thing right and doing the right thing. So it's something I'm quite passionate about. It's trying to find what problem to solve very specifically before starting to go into solutions. So this is a methodology that can be applied to any marketing campaign, any product design, but also anytime you want to work with data and explain something to people. The idea is to start with an initial insight and start with a discovery phase before define the right problem specifically before developing your solution. For example, a couple of years ago, in my job at Penguin Books, I got contacted by two different teams, the metadata team and the creative team, trying to think about how to recommend the right book to the right person. You can approach that from very different perspectives. Instead of jumping onto solutions as we have done in the past, trying to develop some chatbots, for example, of some websites, the first thing that we've done is try to gather all the right people in the room, explore every possible option that we have explored in the past, analyze the data, have a look at what happened before, and think about what the best business opportunity was. The conclusion to all these meetings and this thinking has been that we already had a really very nice solution to recommend books to people, which is an initiative we have on Twitter called Ask Penguin. But the way to make that better and more impactful and to learn from what we're doing was to try to build some automation on the back of it. It's looking really good and very exciting, and I don't think we would have been able to come to that solution if we had not thought about the right question before trying to answer it. Another thing I like about this methodology is that when you have defined the question very precisely, then it's quite easy to define your objectives, your goals, and your KPIs, and therefore to measure the impact of what you have done. Second tip, proper project management. Project management is something I have done quite a lot in marketing agencies before. So when I was working for Nestle, for Coke, for example, and something I've learned along the years is that there are three key principles to any good project, and it's desirability, viability, and resources. It's easily illustrable in a nice Venn diagram. I love Venn diagrams. What I mean by these three principles are the fact that desirability is based on users. You want to create something that is interesting and appealing to people. Viability has to do with business goal. Is what you are doing useful for the business? What is it going to bring to the business? And the third point can be overlooked sometimes, and it's feasibility. Feasibility has to do with resources, both in terms of people, but also in terms of technology. Do we have what we need to be able to do the right thing? I often find that with data, specifically with things like machine learning or AI, words that are kind of buzzy and excite people a lot, feasibility can be overlooked. And it's quite important to be able to translate that very effectively and explain what are the resources that you need. Third tip, user first. It's something I've kind of touched on with the previous point, but I wanted to do a bit of more of a focus because it's something that we have a look at in marketing and in communication a lot. Every marketing strategy starts with audiences and trying to think about who is your target group and who they are, how do they work, what do they think, what type of media do they consume. This is easily translatable to anything you do in business. And specifically in my job, in my day-to-day, I build quite a lot of dashboards for people. And I find that the very first step is to try to think about who I'm talking to. How are they comfortable with data? How do they like to access their tools? What is useful for them in their day-to-day? But I also try to stay with them within the process. So by drafting things and involving them when I design the dashboard and testing things with them, it gives me the best possible feedback and helps me make sure that I do the right thing for them and that what I do for them has an impact. Fourth section, storytelling. This is something that I think is more and more important in the data world at the moment, and it's something that's quite a big foundation of communication generally. Once you have found the problem you're trying to solve, the audience you want to talk to, and the business goal you want to achieve, then you need to find the message that you want to pass on to people to be able to have the impact that you want to have. And to be able to communicate a message effectively, there are 4 steps that I find quite easy to remember. It's something that I've got taught at The Guardian a couple of years ago in a really nice database training that I followed. The idea is you have your data and the insights that you want to pass on. Before jumping to charting and to modeling, think about your story, think about your message. What do you want people to learn when they look at the tool that you developed for them? A way for me to think about the story when I design something is to step away a little bit from my screen. I like to do that by working on pen and paper. It's something I used to do in agencies quite a lot. When you start working on a campaign and think with creative teams, you step away from all the elements and just try to think a little bit freely. It's a bit of the same thing here. Once I have my audience and I know what is going to be potentially useful for them, I step away from my data to not go into old habits. And looking at a blank page, at a blank piece of paper, forces me to really think about what is going to be useful for them, what is the right metric, how do I want them to journey through the tool that I'm building for them. The other thing is that by designing things on pen and paper, I find that I can go to my stakeholders a lot more easily, and they are keener to give me some feedback. Because when you show something on pen and paper, it looks less complicated, and people are a bit more likely to give you honest feedback, which is sometimes a bit tricky to get. But feedback is the key to any successful experience, I think. And finally, the last section for me had to do with going out of your comfort zone. Today, I've tried to pull some insights from marketing to data that could be useful to any data professional. But I also think that stepping from a field to another has a lot to do with the idea of comfort and the idea of being comfortable with trying new things. And it's something that I find quite fascinating, sometimes a bit unsettling. And to me, there are 3 key fundamentals. The first one is that by doing that, you keep learning, and by being open-minded and asking feedback from people and asking questions, you can grow and learn, from my point of view, just about anything as soon as you approach that with an open mind. But the second point is that being confident in the skills that you have, even if they are not technical ones, and having less anxiety about being comfortable and bringing something to the table, you can question things open-mindedly. I always like to question language or to question acronyms, for example, to avoid falling into old habits and trying to find new ways to think about things. The design thinking and double diamond methodology that I presented in the beginning is, I think, a really good example. When I work with very, very technical teams, one of the things I always try to do is to step back and go, wait, guys, I understand that we need to do these things to get there, but what are we really trying to do here? What is the why behind it? And I think I'm only capable of doing that because I come a little bit sideways. In the same way, moving from France to England and working in publishing is very interesting because I get to see books from an external point of view, which is potentially closer to the one that our audiences have. The last thing I wanted to say is thank you all. And if I have like one final tip to give everybody is to, it sounds very cheesy, but find what makes you happy and find what drives you. For me, going from a field to another and being able to explore different possibilities and to nourish teams is because I get to do what I love and what I'm excited about. And finally, I think in data, there's quite a breadth of jobs, and sometimes data can be a bit of an empty word and a word that people are not really sure what to put against. And I feel like roles like what I like to call translator roles, storyteller roles, have potentially a bright future because being able to act as a connector and being able to join up quite technical people who enjoy breaking down problems and business users has an enormous potential, I think. Thank you.
I'm just going to put your slide on there. So if anyone has any questions, they can reach out to you on LinkedIn, Twitter.
Yes, all the things.
things.
I have quite a distinctive name, so you will find me easily. Please do reach out. I know some of you have already on LinkedIn, which is very, very nice. Very happy to have a chat. Very happy to answer some questions now. I think we have 5 minutes if some people want to dive into some topics a bit more specifically. I know it was quite a whistle stop tour.
We're very efficient,
right?
Like, we're very on time.
Data people.
I might do one question. I know personally as a marketer, I never thought being in data was possible without having that kind of background.
Yes.
What was one of the first things that you did to even realize that you wanted this kind of role and this kind of career, and what did you do to prepare yourself in your spare time for that?
It was quite a soft transition, to be honest. So I used to work in a marketing agency, and we did a lot of surveys to consumers, and I really loved analyzing these surveys, just like by doing a couple of private tables, and then bringing that back to Nestle, to Coke, to whichever client I was working with, and be able to explain them, this is what people really think of your product, and that could be interesting to change, and seeing the impact that it had drove me a lot. So when I felt like I had reached the end of my journey in my agency, I realized that I really liked this aspect, and I was like, oh, maybe something a bit more analytical could be interesting. And the job I got at Penguin was a digital marketing analyst. So I had this marketing background and this audience knowledge that was very useful, and I was lucky enough to be hired by someone who kind of betted on me. He tested me quite a lot during the recruitment process to see if I had the skills to be able to learn. It looked like I had, and then was very open-minded and taught me a lot of things. So in my first 3 months, I had 2 hours blocked in my agenda every day to learn things. For example, Google Analytics was one of the first things I done when I joined. And then I got my hands dirty and started analyzing things.
If anyone has any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. Did you guys have anything? If not, we can go straight. We're going straight into the next session, which is Imposter Syndrome. I don't know.
Making it harder for everyone. The reason why I wanted to talk a little bit about Imposter Syndrome was, given that it's International Women's Day kind of on Sunday, but kind of we're celebrating it this entire month, it felt like a topic that's always relevant, no matter kind of what industry in, how long you've been in the industry. Imposter Syndrome is something that I see coming up a lot. And especially to Clara's last point about getting out of your comfort zone to do that, you're inevitably going to feel a little bit of imposter syndrome. So yeah, I wanted to build a session around kind of how you would navigate that. So for anyone who missed the introduction, my name's Archana, and if you've never heard the term imposter syndrome before, let me go ahead and just define it for everyone so we're all on the same page. So it's when someone doubts their accomplishments or achievements to the point where they have an internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. And I'm going to get on to some examples of what that actually looks like in the real world in just a second. But before that, let me go ahead and introduce myself. So I'm one of the co-leaders for Data Plus Women in London, but day to day, I'm a senior solutions engineer at Tableau, where I've been for 3.5 years. I now work with customers in the media and entertainment sector, so I get to have a little bit of fun with glitz and glamour. I think the way one of our senior leaders described it is we do the same thing that everyone else in the business does, but we get to do it with celebrities. So I'm yet to meet any celebrities just yet. I'm still counting on that. As I said at the beginning, I am a proud Londoner, so much so that I've teared up watching Nike ads, and I've rewatched the 2012 Olympics opening ceremony at least once a year. I do go back and watch it and just cry every time. And I mentioned earlier that I love watching reality TV, and every time I go back to update this slide, I realize that there's a new show that I'm into. So currently, my favorite is Love is Blind on Netflix. Highly recommend if you are, if you have nothing better to do than watch some TV. Sync up my slides. Yeah, so before jumping in, I wanted to explain a little bit about my kind of personal relationship with imposter syndrome. So when I started at Tableau, I was fresh out of university. I literally graduated 2 weeks before, and I was taking on my first real job. I was joining a technical sales team with no experience in software nor sales, and I was joining this team as one of a few women and one of the only women of color on the team. So feeling like an imposter and also overcoming that feeling has been a big part of my career journey so far. So to get into it, how does imposter syndrome manifest in day-to-day life? It comes with asking questions of yourself and having repeated thoughts like, did I just get lucky? Or I feel like a fake? Or what happens when everyone finds out I'm not as good as they think I am? I've tricked everyone. And also, if I can do it, then it can't be that hard. And for me especially, that last one hits home hard. Self-deprecating humor is a really common way in which imposter syndrome manifests itself, as it's an easy way to weasel out of any compliments, but also lean on as a crutch when you're feeling out of place. So let's get some data on this. So historically, research has suggested that this was a phenomenon only amongst high-achieving women. But recently, studies have shown that it actually is more widespread and affects both men and women. That being said, though, I think it's important to recognize that for women, especially those who work in male-dominated fields, their real-world experiences may actually confirm the imposter syndrome that they're feeling, so that external factors are kind of validating feelings that they're internally feeling. So one personal example that comes to mind is when I go to customer meetings where I'm asked a lot of technical questions, typically by a man, that actually aren't really relevant to the situation. It feels like they're trying to validate my broader knowledge, and I'm having to almost work twice as hard to prove that I'm worthy of a place in the room than if my male colleague was in that meeting instead. Next, I want to talk about why I think imposter syndrome is actually more pervasive with people who work in data compared to other sectors. And this comes from a resource that I found from Caitlin Hudden. So again, I'll share the slide and the link to that afterwards so you can jump into that a little bit more. But a good example is I speak to customers every day who work with data in some capacity, from database administrators to analysts to data scientists. And these are just the people who have data in their titles. You're kind of missing out on the countless business users who don't have data in their titles, but are still working with data, using Excel, using Tableau day to day. And what I see amongst these customers is people who wear a lot of different hats. For example, an analyst who works with a business unit, or a database administrator who also is a server architect, or a data scientist who also has to create data visualizations. And there's a combination of so many fields together, and it's relatively few of us that actually have an educational background in something like statistics or IT or computer science, that it's really easy to look around you and feel out of place when, you know, you're an analyst, but you're working with a data scientist who has a degree in statistics, for example. It's also especially common with data science in particular. It's a relatively new field that's still trying to figure itself out. In fact, the first time data scientist was used as a job title was only 8 years ago, so that's relatively new within the span of all the titles that we're used to hearing when it comes to data. And it's also a growing field in terms of the technologies and the specialized software that emerge. Take, for example, R, Python, or MATLAB, or within databases, Snowflake, SQL, and MongoDB, or within visualization, Tableau, Power BI, Click. I like to remind myself of this diagram on the slide a lot. When you are wearing a few different hats, it's easy to think that everyone else knows more than you, but it's important to remember that from their point of view, they probably think the same as you. Yeah, next slide. So on to kind of the good versus the bad, and I'm going to start with the bad so that we actually end on a positive note, and I don't leave you all feeling kind of down and in despair. So Dr. Valerie Young has categorized imposter syndrome into a number of subgroups, each coming with specific examples on how it can affect the way you work day to day, your long-term goals, and your mental well-being. So Caroline has just launched a poll, but I'm going to go through and define each of them. So listen out for the one you identify the most with, and then go ahead and vote in the poll, because I'm curious to see kind of what's most common amongst our Data Plus Women community. And also, if you're a man joining in, of course, imposter syndrome is not unique to women, so also feel free to pick an option that you relate to the most. So first up is the perfectionist. She sets excessively high goals for herself, and if she fails to reach a goal, she'll begin to experience major self-doubt. And examples of how this manifests day to day is difficulty delegating work to others because you don't want to necessarily take the blame if that project goes wrong, but also procrastinating on even starting in order to avoid getting it wrong in the first place. Second is the superwoman, who pushes themselves harder and harder and harder to make up for a perceived gap in her competence. And that includes things like staying late in the office, even if you don't need to, so that you can try and learn more and more and more, or keep adding to that project and really flesh it out to the point where you actually didn't maybe need to put in as much work. And it's also feeling like when you aren't busy at work, when you have a period of downtime, that it's a waste of your time, and you still put in all the resource and the energy into creating work for yourself, or learning opportunities for yourself to make up for that gap, or that perceived gap, I should say, in competence. Then it's the gifted. This is someone who has a track record of getting straight A's or gold stars at school and university, and things tend to come quite easily to them. They are smart people. But what happens is when they don't pick something up on the first try, alarm bells start ringing, and they start to panic, and they just feel kind of lost because everything in life so far has come to them pretty easily. Next is the individualist, who feels like asking for help will reveal their perceived phoniness. Remember that it's okay to be independent, but not to the extent where you're refusing assistance just to prove your worth. And last but not least is the expert, who probably has the deepest fear of being exposed as inexperienced. And symptoms include not applying for a job because you don't meet every requirement. And I'm sure lots of people have heard that statistic about how women apply to jobs when they meet 100% of the requirements, while men are comfortable applying when they only meet 60% of the requirements. So that's a good example of where imposter syndrome, while it affects everyone, is more common amongst women. And again, kind of relating back to that superwoman, is the expert is someone who tries to hoard knowledge for a false sense of comfort, rather than acquiring skills as and when you need them. So with that, I'm going to put up all the definitions on the screen, and go ahead and vote now that you've heard a little bit more about each one. No. We'll keep it out for a second just for everyone to submit their choice. I'm going to lean over to Caroline and just see what it says on her screen.
I did want to call out, I know personally, I feel like I fit into a little bit of each of these sometimes, and I think that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Like we can see the traits.
Yeah, it's a little bit like
star signs. Every description can fit you, and I think it's the scenario in which you feel maybe most exposed, I guess. So like being customer facing versus being in your own team meeting, imposter syndrome can manifest in two quite different ways. So yeah, I'm asking everyone to pick one, but I recognize that you might not all be one.
We do have a question. So how can I identify and support any of my team that might feel imposter syndrome without disempowering them? Which is a very good question.
Good question. I think I think first of all is don't assume that someone is having imposter syndrome, because that's going to make them feel like they actually are an imposter. If you go and you're like, hey, I see that you're working late a lot, and do you think that's because you're behind? Because then immediately, if my manager did that to me, I'd be like, oh God, he knows. He knows, he's noticed. So I think first of all is recognize the behaviors, and I think just discussing them quite casually in team meetings and stuff is the way to bring it out of people and get them to identify with that label themselves, because I don't think it's a label that should be pushed onto people. And then when it comes to how you can support a team member, I think it is completely a part of I guess when you start a new role or a new team especially, it's that onboarding process into the team. Creating a culture where you feel comfortable asking questions, where if you ask a question, that project is not going to be taken away from you, that kind of thing, so that you can all lean on each other, and you go from that like small circle within a big circle model to I'm the center with my team around me to support, and we can all lean on each other.
I'm going to end the polling now.
What was our highest, just out of curiosity?
Our highest was the expert.
The expert. Ooh,
so I'm going to share the results now, so everyone who's on this call should be able to see. I feel like expert and perfectionist are very, very close. And
they're also quite, I would say, almost like inextricably. I can't speak English today. They are linked, is what I'm trying to say.
Not mutually exclusive.
Yes, exactly.
That's what we want. Cool. Next slide.
Yes, let's go. So I want to come on to the good side of imposter syndrome. It is mostly talented individuals that feel this way. So if you Google entrepreneur or celebrity and imposter syndrome, you'll find countless lists of people who've mentioned, even in using the word and the phrasing imposter syndrome, feeling that feeling, whether it be an actor who's been in the industry for countless years, coming down to entrepreneurs working with a startup. Second of all, I think kind of tied to the question from the Q&A is, as long as you recognize when a thought like that is intrusive or it's leading to a destructive or unproductive behavior, recognizing that and figuring out tactics for yourself personally that work to help kind of, when that thought comes to your mind, just remind yourself, no, I've been hired, I was chosen to do this job, and kick out that thought. That energy can still help you to push and challenge yourself. And it's something that I listened to on a podcast recently, is that feeling nervous about something means you're excited about it. It means you care. Because if you didn't care, you wouldn't feel nervous. And that in and of itself is daring, and that's important. So channel that energy into being productive. And then last but not least, on the very last slide, is probably the most comforting thing for me, is that true imposters don't suffer imposter syndrome, because they're unaware of their own ignorance. They don't know what they don't know. And so they're at the peak of what this chart likes to call Mount Stupid. And I like to remind myself of that when I see someone in the room being very loud. I think the phrasing is like when someone's loud and wrong, where they're just saying a lot of BS and they're being very loud about it. So they seem confident, they seem like they know a lot, but even then, when you're sitting in the room, you can kind of see that they're saying things that might be wrong, or that's just their imposter syndrome manifesting in a way where, for them, their tactic or their coping mechanism is to be loud about it. So with that, I'm going to thank you all and kind of just wrap up at least my personal journey with imposter syndrome, and I want to close by talking a little bit about where I am now. So when I started, I was fresh out of university, and although I'm still at Tableau, so I don't have that extensive career history. I'm still technically, I can say, you know, first real job, that label still applies. I now know that I have over 3 years worth of knowledge with Tableau specifically. And even when new people join, they might have 10 years, 15 years experience in the industry. They have their knowledge of BI or sales. I always remind myself that if there is one thing I know inside out, it's Tableau. And I own that knowledge. And that's something no one can take away from me. And then my second point was I was joining a technical sales team with no experience in software or sales. And this kind of ties again back to the question is trust the onboarding process and the on-the-job experience you can gain. Because if you've been hired, they want you there for a reason. If you've been hired, I guess, and made it through probation, they want you there for a reason. And, you know, use your team, use your manager, use the resources available to you, and don't be afraid of being vulnerable at work and say, you know, I'm feeling this way. I need some extra support. I want to ramp up my learning. I feel during my onboarding, I missed out on this key piece of knowledge that I'm seeing come up a lot. You know, let that inform the decision so that for the next person that comes along, you've improved the process. And then last thing for me was when I was joining, I was one of the few women and only women of color on the team. And representation really does matter. And the demographics of a traditionally white male team is changing more and more. Our own team has progressed leaps and bounds in the last 3 years. And women on the team have progressed into leadership, into more senior roles, and even roles outside of our immediate team, doing crazy cool things in marketing and customer success, all sorts of things. So when putting together this presentation, I was conscious that I didn't have any practical tips to offer people, but I think for me that was just because it's quite a personal journey with both internal and external attributes. So internally meaning your own ability to recognize what a destructive thought is or what a destructive behavior is, but also external factors like hiring practices when it comes to representation of minorities on your team or training and personal development. So I think for me, I hope at least I've left you with some food for thought, especially with those 5 types of imposter syndrome, because I think it's an ongoing journey, and just recognizing when one of those 5s is kind of bubbling up to the surface, that in and of itself, I think is a win, because, you know, I'm at the beginning of my career, but, you know, people who've been in what they do for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, as technology changes and as we're kind of skyrocketing in terms of like the amount of information we have access to, I think imposter syndrome will always be there, and it's more about managing it and coping with it.
We do have 2 questions.
Okay.
One is many tech roles will positively discriminate to hire more women. This can make you feel like maybe you only got the role because of your gender. How do you rationalize this? And this is open to everyone, obviously. Yeah. So we'll go from you.
Yeah, I can start by taking it. I actually had a slide on tokenism in here, but I had to take it out for time.
But now we have time.
But now we have time because I talk too fast. Yeah. So what you're describing is called tokenism. If that's something you want to look into a little bit more, but it's essentially the practice of hiring, for example, a woman or someone of color, purely to say that we have met our diversity quota. And I think when it comes to hiring, especially, ultimately they've still chosen to hire you because you will do a good job at that job and you're going to add value to the business. And so I think I've had those thoughts kind of creep up on me and rear that ugly head, is am I only being picked to do this because they want a woman to do this, or they want a South Asian person to do this? And I think you have to be a little bit mercenary in your approach and kind of be a little bit selfish and say, well, so what if they pick me on that basis? I'm going to prove to them that I'm the right choice. And I'm going to take this opportunity and run with it if it will give me the exposure I want, if it will give me the promotion I want, and just run with it, because they've made their decision on the grounds of whatever their decision-making criteria is, but that doesn't mean that you are not going to fit the bill. Yeah. So an answer / not an answer.
Did you guys want to add anything to that?
And also Evie on the line.
Oh, yes. Do you have anything as well that you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I think Archana got it all.
we do have another question. I'd be really interested in hearing your experiences at how men can be or have been more supportive and be better allies.
You can take that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Give me the mic.
Hello. Right. So I work for Penguin Books, as I said earlier, and it's a company that's quite there's a lot of women in the company, which is very interesting. And we have something called creative responsibility, which is essentially all our ethical principles, and inclusion is a really big one. And we are thinking about women in tech quite a lot at the moment. I feel like the first thing is to be conscious of your biases, and I think that applies exactly to what Archie was saying earlier, and that applies to from men towards women, but to anything. Questioning yourself and questioning the way you view things, and being very aware of your biases, because we are living biases. That's okay to be biased, but as soon as you're conscious of your biases, you can try to start saying things from a very different point of view. The second point I would say is to make sure you create enough space for everybody to be able to speak up. I've noticed often that women can be a bit more soft-spoken, specifically in big meetings. I have some extremely talented colleagues who very often have the right answer, but just won't say it because they're a bit more soft-spoken. So personally, as a supportive colleague and also as a manager, I always try to be extremely careful about the lowest voices in the room. And I feel like from men trying to support women in data, that can be something interesting, making sure if you're taking a lot of space, or if other people are taking a lot of space, to give space to others who don't naturally take it. And the last one would be to actively value and promote different points of view. I think inclusion, diversity is crucial to innovation, and is crucial to fantastic projects. And if you are capable of listening to a different point of view, but also incentivizing it, that can be a really good way to be a good ally, I think.
You wanna?
I can add onto that, kind of to add to amplify voices. I think even a step before that is just believe them. Yeah. When I shared the example about feeling like because I'm a woman, I'm getting asked more technical questions to validate my knowledge. I've shared that with men on my team, and sometimes they'd be like, "Oh, they would do that to me too." But it's not because you're a woman, and you just believe women, believe minorities, and I think especially for when you're asking how can men be better allies, is don't gaslight women, and don't to throw out a really angry word, that don't gaslight minorities in terms of their experience. And when I think about imposter syndrome, if there's one thing I'm not an imposter on, it's being me. I'm the world's foremost expert on being Archana and living this world as Archana, in the same way you're the expert on being Caroline and Clara and all of us. And so believe women, believe minorities, and then also to that is, that doesn't just mean say, "Hey, go girl," and give me a high five, and be that enabling them. And really actively listen, and also just empathize, because sometimes I have gotten angry about something and actually it's because of XYZ reason that's happening to that person externally that I wasn't aware of. And I've had some of the best male allies that I have at work are able to talk me down from they were doing that because you're a woman, which suspects maybe I came from, and teaching me that empathy as well. So that's my piece.
Yeah, I mean, to add on to that, I think an easy thing men can do to be better allies is just to show up and listen to experiences. For example, at KPMG for Women's Day, we had workshops called Beyond Bias. And so that was about equality, inherent bias, and kind of just intersectionality in the workplace. And the 2 sessions I went to, there were 0 men there. And I actually think these workshops are made for men, because if I feel like if you listen, empathize, with these experiences, they will go into your actions and the things you do in the workplace to help uplift women.
That's a really good point. I also think that boys club culture as well, if you can identify when those things are happening, and actively look at trying to be more inclusive, because I think especially in our industry, it can be very gender dominated, male, and that can feel at times that there is a boys club, and then certain topics are spoken about that doesn't necessarily resonate with everyone. It'd be really great if there's quite a few within our own company that I think of that would never want to perpetuate that feeling, and I rely on them to help me feel included when there's obviously some kind of boys club, I don't want to say sports, but sometimes when things like that happen, there's a sense of othering taking place, and then identifying when that is happening is also step one, and then trying to not perpetuate it. Step two. We're at 1:23, so we still have some more time. We do have a comment in the chat. If someone can read that. Should I read it? Yes.
Mm-hmm. So it says, just to add to your point about tokenism, historically POC have not always been given opportunities, whereas brackets mostly white men, even though they were not necessarily the best candidates, have still been given the chance. Sorry, I'm trying to correct it as I go. So now it's the time for everyone else to have a go, right? I think it's a leveling of the playing field.
What we'll do is, I've taken a few notes through this session, a few keywords that maybe what we can do is after send a bit more information about, the tokenism. I think there's a few articles we know that can help with the Better Allies part. Eva's session earlier, there's going to be quite a few resources that you guys can refer to after this. And of course, you can reach out to us to learn a little bit more about any of these topics. These are things that obviously hit pretty close to home. If you want to scan that, I think most smartphones can read QR codes, but I don't really know. But we will share these slides after. You can click that link. We have our subscription page if you haven't seen it already. We are on Meetup. But I do recommend going to the other website, the Data Plus Women London one, more, just because we'll try and keep a closer contact with that list. The Meetup is a few nuances there. It was just a bit confusing. Admin work there. And you can also follow us on Twitter. And we are always looking for speakers. So there is a link here. Please do sign up. If you've been in this session, we don't necessarily always talk very technical things. So we're looking for a broad range of speakers and topics. If you think that you could fit into any of these examples below, or even if they don't quite fit, we really want to hear from you anyway. If there's I don't see any more questions, but we will be sharing this afterwards. And save the date. Our next one, we've got Ivy doing a little SQL challenge. I think it's a murder mystery. Is that right?
Murder mystery, yep.
Yes. So if you want to learn, this is for beginners, all levels really. I know right now we haven't been able to meet in person. We're hoping to make this a hands-on technical session, but we shall see. Tentative. We are monitoring everything really closely. We are data people. We are looking at the data all the time. So if we can make this in person, we would love it. It will most likely be in the Tableau offices in London. Ivy, if you want to add anything as well about this session.
No, not really. It's going to be fun, and hopefully it can be in person. We'll get pizza.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks everyone. Thanks for dialing in. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.